Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. Our guest today is a remarkable individual, and you're going to love learning her story and gaining in knowledge from her wisdom. So let me tell you about her. Dr. Bertice Berry is a sociologist. She's an award-winning author and a celebrated storyteller who has inspired millions through her wisdom, her humor, her heart. From growing up in poverty as one of 7 children to not only being the first in her family to graduate college, but ultimately earning a Ph.D. in sociology. Bertice's story is an encouragement to all of us to live authentically, reflect on our best selves, and then shine brighter for those around us, not for ourselves ultimately, but for them. Today, Bertice joins us to share how her early struggles shaped her belief in hope and blessings, even during the hardest of times. She reflects on the life lessons learned from her mother's transformation. It's a beautiful story. The importance of forgiveness. It's a critical story. And why cleaning the light. I love that story. Literally and metaphorically helps us see more clearly and deeply in life. Bertice also discusses her challenges with MS and the mental chains that can hold us back more than even the physical ones. My friends, if you need a reminder that your story matters and that your struggles can become blessings, this conversation today is for you. You will leave inspired to embrace your own narrative, find strength in your scars, and share your light with a world longing for it. So let me bring her on to the Live Inspired podcast, my new friend, and now yours, her name, Dr. Bertice Berry. Bertice, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Talk about living inspired. That's what you do. You live inspired. You inspire others to live. You remind us to be in awe of every day. I don't even know how we call it every day. Thank you. Thank you.
Bertice, you reflect light. And one of the things that amazes me, whether I'm sitting in one of your presentations, whether I'm listening to your voice on my own podcast or someone else's, whether I'm reading something you've written or watching one of your morning sessions where you want to tell me a story, every time I hear that voice, I hear hope, even in the midst of despair. Talk about that for a moment. I know it's not probably where you expected this conversation to begin, but even in the way you reflect the light right back to me with praise, talk about the joy in your heart.
It's an interesting question. I once wrote a paper in graduate school how hope was a game of the elite to keep the masses locked in, right? And my professor said to me, "You are one of the most hopeful people I know." And I said, what are you talking about? I'm looking at life, I'm looking at the world, all the things that I've come from. And he said, "No, you are the most hopeful person I know. So look at this from the other side." And I did. And in doing that, I realized that hope is the other side of the coin of despair, that anomie, the complete sense of hopelessness. It's the thing that doesn't rob just the poor, it robs the rich as well. And so if we can give people anything, it is hope in their own self. So my existence, as crazy as it sounds, is to use my stories, the story of my life, stories of my life, because we don't have a story, we have a library, to use those stories to allow people to reflect and see. We are neurologically wired for narrative. You don't have to do any work. You tell a story, and everybody's mind automatically goes to the story and the point of connection. We've learned to kind of shut that down, but it's there and it's simple and it's easy. And the more of that muscle we use, the more we see, and the more light we reflect, the more others are reflecting it as well.
That's a strong way to start this conversation. So
Yeah.
you mentioned, in particular, from where I came, meaning
Yeah.
that there's a story, maybe even a book, possibly a library of
Yeah.
experiences in your life that are part of who you are today. So I
Yeah.
grew up on Winmore Place in St. Louis, Missouri, with 2 radically, faithfully loving parents, 5
Yes.
siblings, no fights. very little anger. And when there was anger, there were apologies afterwards, church on Sundays, pancakes afterwards, and two golden retrievers in the backyard.
Yeah,
That's my story.
yeah.
You, my friend,
One of them.
grew up on
It's one
Gordon.
of them.
Yeah, it's one of them. There's others, but that's a foundational piece.
Yeah,
You grew up on Gordon
yeah,
between 22nd and 23rd
yep,
in a very radically different experience and story. Would you take our
yeah.
audience a little bit through what your upbringing was like?
Yeah, Gordon Street was not a street, it was an alley between two streets. And there was a house next to ours. Their family lived in for a short time and then they moved away. And there was a motorcycle gang at the end of our block. And across from us were rows of lime green garages. It was early storage units. People didn't really have storage units like we have today, but they were the early storage units of business owners, of people who had things that they didn't want to keep at home. So they kept them in those units on our block, these wooden units on our block. And from time to time, you'd see people come by to get their things out, to put something in. And it was mysterious and weird. And my mom, single mom of 7 kids, she worked at a nursing home, double shifts, extreme poverty. We had a coal stove and never could afford coal. You know, we were cold and we were hungry very often. And then very often we knew we were blessed. We knew we were blessed somehow. We had gone to church up until the time I was about 5 or 6, and then suddenly just stopped, and I had no knowledge as to why. I started going back to church on my own when I was 12, but very, very different lifestyle that we both have had, and yet we both have suffered something that allowed us to see how amazing everything can be. I like to think that no one has a monopoly on suffering. No one has a monopoly on a window into joy. And sometimes we do this thing, black, white, male, female, rich, poor. That's all we can see. But everybody has gone through something. Everybody has held some shame about something they can't control. I have MS, and I didn't know how much shame I was holding around MS until one day I was with a group of clergy at a clergy conference in the Episcopal Church here in Georgia. And we were at our retreat center, and you walk over to the chapel and then you walk back. And in the past, that walk has not been a thing at all. And it's a thing now. There's roots growing out of the ground of this beautiful place, and there's stuff, and one little slip, and I'm gonna trip, and you don't want to do that. And it was our canon said to me, there's a road you can drive. And she said, come on, I'll ride with you. And she jumped in my car. And I just started to weep and sob. And I said, I didn't know how much shame I was holding around something I didn't cause. And in that moment, I understood the shame that people carry about racism, about disability or differently abled, about living on the spectrum, about their sexuality. I understood this thing that we hold that we didn't cause, and yet somehow we feel a responsibility in it. So, yeah, very different background, but both of us have suffered something to cause us to look at the world in a unique and I think beautiful way. And that's a long, long answer.
We're in trouble today because I have unfortunately done a lot of research on you. So I have 17 pages of notes and 208 questions. You're currently through number 2. So let's go into, they're actually not numbered like that, but I keep this little list of questions. I'm going to jump
Yes.
past a lot of them. My first job, cutting my neighbor's grass, babysitting, painting houses and fences, working on a farm. These were some of my first jobs and they were formative. One of your first jobs was cleaning homes.
Yeah.
And there's so many stories I could ask you about regarding this, but I think the one I'd love you to share is the one where you learned to clean the light.
Oh, yeah. I cleaned homes in the morning before school. I cleaned banks at night after school. And the bank job, you catch this bus from school to, I would go to the library.
Bertruce, how old are you at this age?
Um, 13, 12, 13. So you catch the bus and school is out at 3, but the bank doesn't close until 6. And then you have to work after it closes. There's going to be a period of time after they close, and then you go into work. So I'm catching the bus with women who are also going or coming from cleaning jobs, and I'm just a girl. And so I would ask these women different things. The Saturday morning women were interesting, but the after school women were fascinating. And I go, well, what do you do to make the house look great? And how do you make it look so wonderful? And what do you do? And they would all tell me different things and tricks that they would use. But there was this one woman who was an older woman, and she would kind of stand off and she would, like eye me and like, are you really serious? Are you really here for the long haul? Do you care? Finally, one day, she was willing to give me a tip. And she said, always clean the lights. And I was like, ma'am? And she said, the light. You know that light they have in the vestibule when you come in? That one big light. Ain't nobody ever cleaned that light. You got to clean that light. And I was like, ma'am? And she said, it was interesting. She said, go under the sink. They keep the cleaning stuff under there. Get some of the Windex, but pour it in a nice bowl. If they got a crystal bowl, pour it in that crystal bowl, because even the blue liquid will shine from that bowl when you're up there cleaning. And so she said, you clean with a dry cloth first. You clean off all the dust, and then you clean with that Windex, and you clean those crystals and clean whatever is on the fixture. But don't forget to clean the light. Always clean the light. And I did that. And the first house I did it in, the woman came out and said, oh my God, it's so clean in here. And I had already done the cleaning, but then I cleaned that light. So, oh my God, it's so clean in here. The husband came out and said, oh, it's so amazing in here. Oh my goodness, it's so clean. And he said, whatever this is, pay her extra and get her back. And people are not trying to pay little black girl what she was due when I felt like I was due. So she paid me a few dollars more. But what I realized was that you can clean and take care of everything else. You can take care of all the outside stuff, but that light
Mm.
that reflects everything else is the thing that is often missed. And I think that the light, what Duncan McDougall called 21 grams, that 21 grams of what the weight of the spirit is, a little bit less than the weight of a mustard seed, actually quite a bit less than the weight of a mustard seed. That thing, that light, we often take care of everything, our house, our car, our stuff, ourself, but we ignore that light.
Mm.
And it has always stayed with me. I didn't continue to do the cleaning work, but that light is so critical and important in our lives. And I'm sure when you were working on farms and you're working, cutting grass, you ask questions and you learn things. And those things have never left you. They shaped your values, they shaped your course, they shaped your way of thinking. And we often ignore those lessons, but that light lesson is so rich to me.
Me too. And I'm grateful you cleaned the light and you still do and you reflect it. So let's move forward. You moved through junior high into high school, and it's in high school where you're told by one of your well-intended teachers that college is not for you,
Yeah,
Dr. Berry. College is
yeah,
not for you.
yeah,
When a little girl who grows up on that alley, who's cleaning houses for other people, who's being dismissed by almost everybody now by a teacher, tells you that your dream is not for you, how do
yeah.
you respond, and what do you do next?
So let me back up a bit because I had not said college to anyone. I was going to this Pentecostal church and they had this thing called an unspoken request, where whatever your prayer is, you come up and you pray for that and you don't tell anybody and you just hold it in your heart. And I had two things. I wanted my mother to start coming to church. I wanted her to change her ways. My mother was angry and alcoholic, and she became the most loving earth mother on the planet. So those things I don't ever dwell on, but that's what it was then. And so I would pray for that. And I would pray that one day I could go to this place called college, which was like Disney World, because we weren't going there either. And, and And so I didn't say it to anybody, but I had this teacher, Karen Denton, who read one of my papers, and Karen said to me, "You should go to college." And it was, John, it was like God said, "Bertice, I heard you, and I will make a way." She said this thing that I had not spoken. So when this other teacher says, because at that point I think I'd said, "I'm going to college." I mean, it took a year to say it out loud after Karen said it. He said, "If by chance you somehow get into college, don't unpack because they'll send you home." I lived out of my luggage for 6 months. You want to believe, oh, I'm not affected by it. But the fear and the anxiety that I had packing my things on the flight, landing, I kept thinking, as long as my name is on a list, I will prove everybody wrong. So there were those who said, "This is not for you," because no one in my family had ever been to college. I don't mean siblings, I mean anybody. There were those who said that, but all I needed was Karen
Mm.
to say it out loud. And I think sometimes even in the midst of things, the thing that is loudest is that negativity. But there's already been somebody telling you and reflecting the agreement you have with God, and that is that all things are possible.
Well, you eventually unpack Jacksonville University,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
remain unpacked until finally you pack it back up again with a diploma and move on to postgraduate work. Where did you go next? What were you studying and why?
So I went to Kent State University. I was always studying sociology. I was never going to be anything but a sociologist.
So tell the novices in the room, including the one asking the question, what in the world is a
As a
sociologist?
sociologist.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Psychologists study individuals and their behavior. Sociologists study groups and the relationships and the organizations that we live in. It's societal, the way we interact with one another. So you could do it at a one-on-one. There's interpersonal relationships, and you can do more macro kinds of organizations or societal impact on life. So sociologists study human behavior outside of this just individual self, which nobody exists as just an individual. We're all connected. I always knew I was going to be a sociologist because I wanted to be a chemical engineer. And the day I went to get a job as a chemical engineer, we had a program in Wilmington, Delaware, where you could work with someone who had the job that you aspired to have. It was a summer job, and I was like a break from my cleaning job, and it was going to be nice. I was going to be in an office in a lab. And the woman, when I showed up, said that because I was wearing my hair in braids, it was not professional. And my handkerchief linen blouse that I bought with my cleaning money, she said was not ironed. And, I wanted to say, "It's handkerchief linen." And, and so I couldn't have that job. And the only job left was in the food stamp office. And my job was filing, and I took that job. And if you're cleaning, filing takes no time. If you've been used to cleaning, a filing job, I'd be done in seconds. And I'd sit and I'd read through files, and I'd notice disparities that some people who were approved shouldn't have been, and some who should have been were not. And I made notes of it. And one day the manager caught me and she said, "What are you doing?" And I was, "Ooh." And I told her what I had done, and I showed her the discrepancies. And she said, "I'm a social worker. You're a sociologist." And from that day on, I knew I was going to be a sociologist. So I graduate with honors. I won the President's Cup for Leadership, which was the highest award of Jacksonville University gave out. I almost didn't go to my graduation, John, because my family couldn't afford to come. And I thought, it's just going to be painful seeing everybody with their families. They convinced me I have to come to this graduation without telling me because the prize is never announced. And I'm not trying to hear it. They're like, "No, because you're our family and I was a leader on the campus." And I was like, "I'm not going. I'm not, it's too painful." So my roommate, Rhonda Williams' father, called and said, "I'm going to be there and I'm going to be your father." So I said, "I can't let them down. They've been sending me brownies throughout the time. I got to go." And I cannot even talk about this without crying. I look up, the entire cleaning and cafeteria staff are standing across the back in uniform, and they're representing me. And so when I go up to win the President's Cup, and I come down and there's all these cheers, and the guy who had helped put me through school, he came to my graduation as a surprise, and but he had some surgery on his nose, and he had a bad nosebleed, so he got there right after the graduation, and so my present was graduate school, but had already gotten a full ride. So then he gifted my roommate graduate school. So then I go to Kent State University, where I not only get my master's and my PhD, I also teach, and then go into stand-up comedy, which is
which you're still currently doing. We'll talk about that later on. So let's talk about your friend who receives the scholarship and just people who receive. You've received so much. You've given plenty, but you've received a bunch as well. Sometimes when you're given a big old gift, it becomes a weight. At least as many of the gifts I've received feel like weights at first. How do you encourage us who feel as if the gifts we've received, whether it's a scholarship, it's pretty long hair, it's intellect, it's a new car, whatever it might be. How do
yeah.
you encourage us to view that gift not as a weight, but as a sale, something we can utilize for good, not only in our lives, but for others?
You have touched a nerve, John. Thank you. I have presents that were given to me in May that are still wrapped, that I will unwrap around Christmas time. And I often say, I'm waiting for a bad day. And then it just doesn't come. And I keep waiting, and then I just have to open them. My mother gave me such a good lesson. She said, "You're such an amazing giver, but you're not good at receiving. You're not good at owning the gifts you've been given. Your humility has become a burden, because it can go beyond humility, where you don't want to accept a compliment or receive that your life is a blessing." And she said, "You don't find balance until you learn to receive. You have to be able to receive the gift as well as giving." And so I think for me, giving is a natural thing. It's almost genetic to me. It becomes this thing that allows me to sail when I see someone else taking that gift and giving it on. And that's where I'm starting to find my balance in receiving and marveling and taking pride in and joy of, and not arrogance, because if you think too high or too low of yourself, the results are the same. You become self-absorbed. It's this balance of being able to go, "Oh my goodness, thank you." And now my gifts are not only amazing, they're like exactly what I want. And it's just like we've been packed. God has given us the gifts that are exactly what we need. But you know how your kids, you pack a lunch that's just for them, and then they get to school and they want to start trading. They think, this is not what I want. I want what you have, and you have what I have, and I want this. We have what we need, but only when we use it and allow it to be this blessing for everyone else do we see that that thing that we thought was a burden is really a blessing.
Hmm. So there's so much there. That thing you thought was a burden is indeed a blessing. One
Mm.
of the burdens, and this is my language, not yours, one of the challenges that you had was your mother. Angry, addicted, condescending, abusive, and not only gave you life, but ultimately taught you an awful lot about life. Her life is redeemed. And one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard, and this one you give credit to your mother for teaching you. I'm going to read it word for word. She said to you, "Forgiveness is not about letting someone else off the hook. It's about getting off the hook they put you on."
Yeah,
Talk about that.
such a blessing that woman was and is to me daily. I get up early in the morning, and I cut a window, right in my bathroom and I can look up and there's a constellation of stars and I'm like, hey, Mom. And so there's still a conversation. She taught me how to forgive. And she give me these lessons, and in my heart was still this unforgiveness around things that she'd done or said or neglected to do or say. I didn't see my mother fully until 6 months after she died. And she'd left these journals for me that told more of why she was as she was. And I've always believed that when you can know someone's story, it's a lot easier to love them. But I think what she gave me before I had that was the ability to love someone without knowing their story, full stories. She said she was able to change because I forgave her. Whoa, what would happen if we could forgive what someone has done before they've asked for forgiveness? Because really, it's for you anyway. Someone recently said to me, your mom was a little mean. I was like, you got her when she was nice. It's like, what are you talking about? Those were her golden years.
That was the sweet version, man.
But she still had a little bit of an edge and she didn't suffer. She suffered no fool. But she had been through so much
Right.
that I will never endure. I can't imagine the life that she had. It was tremendous, tremendously horrifying. And yet, her big thing was she kept us. She did her best to feed us. We always had a roof until there was urban renewal and they came after. I'll never forget, it was after she had paid the rent and they put a sign on our door saying we were being evicted. And she was like, I should have not paid the rent. I have so much respect and admiration for this amazing little tiny woman who could see and hold and understand in the midst of her pain. And it gives me so much love for a lot of difficult folks.
When I was thinking through our conversation, part of me wants to ask you about specific questions of your life, like turning points. But instead, I'm leaning in toward just kind of asking you around questions or quotes that you've shared that have moved me, and then for you
Mm.
to just run. So
Okay.
that's what we're going to do for the next couple of minutes. I'm just going to share with you a quote that I wrote down that I read from you, I heard from you, and it moved me. And I know it's going to move our audience, but I'd love you to unpack what the words mean. So here we go. When you tell a better story, you
Mm.
live a better life.
Yeah. That actually came from the story sharing that started in the pandemic. I knew things were shutting down, and like you, all of our work was going away. You couldn't be in a room with more than what, 9 people or something, and there was nothing that we did
Wild.
less than 1,000 or 500 or whatever. So I knew, and so I decided with MS and severe asthma, if I caught this thing, I probably wouldn't make it. And so, what was I going to do with my life? I sat down in the same spot I'm in now and I wrote down, what do I know and what does my community need? And because of that proverb that when a person seeks their purpose, the universe conspires to answer. Now, Jonna had already started doing deep, deep research into story. And people had begun to ask me to come in and help with framing and reframing their narratives. But then everything shut down. That year, I'd been to Paris and Singapore and Japan and Amsterdam, all these places. And then it was no.
Gone.
So, what do I know? What does my community need? Phone started ringing. 5 people that day called and said that they were depressed to the point of taking their own life. And they felt if they could talk to me, they'd be okay. So it's like, well, okay. And the other thing I knew I could do, I had a head injury, and some people have a head injury and learn a new language. I could sew automatically. I sew everything I wear. I've never used a pattern. I don't measure anybody. It is a gift. It is a complete gift. So I started sewing masks. And before they announced there was a shortage, I was sewing masks for the hospitals that I work with and sending them to them, thinking they could use them outside as a cover and save the other one under it. So I can't sew and talk to these people. And so I said, and because they'd call every day, if I can just talk to you, I can hold on. And I remember talking into the night. And so I said, if I can record it and put it on social media, I think Facebook was where it started. And I didn't use social media. I had an account, but I didn't use it. I wasn't really familiar with it. So I said, well, I'll post this story and they can watch it. I'll tell them where to find it. And they can watch it and they can watch it over and over again because I can't sew and do this. And we got to the point where my daughter and niece and I distributed over 30,000 masks. So we're sewing around the clock. I would record the story early in the morning. I'd get up, read the prayer attributed to St. Francis, share a story, post it. I didn't know that more than those 5 people could see those stories. I didn't, I didn't know. I thought they were the only ones going to see them. And they
I'd never
started,
heard this. I've never heard you share this. That is really funny.
it's ridiculous. So I said to my daughter, people are contacting me from all over the world. My phone is dinging nonstop. Fix my phone. And she said, oh, you've gone viral. And I said, I don't have COVID. And she said, no, but you're very dumb. And so now people are saying, continue. Then I got a call from a woman who had been on a ventilator and her daughter was using her pad from home. She's in the hospital on a ventilator. She's using her pad to communicate with her and sharing the stories.
Yeah.
And so she came off the ventilator, called me through Facebook Messenger. Like they take her off and she says, I have to call Bertice. What? And she says, God wants you to keep going. And I'm like, who is this? You don't have to continue. Like, what in the world? She goes back on the ventilator. And she's in the hospital for 72 days. She survived. And she said it was my stories every day that were calling her. So then I get more involved in story. I'm writing these stories. I'm sharing these stories. People are writing long comments. I reverse engineer a group where people can share with one another without chaos or anger or hatred. So I do that. And then I'm asked by Hospice Savannah to join their board. Well, I was just getting off boards. I had too many boards to be a part of. And then I realized they had a story program. And I said, well, story is what I've been doing. And they said, well, we need you. So then we started a Story Institute. Someone at hospice said, what have you learned with these stories? And I said, well, I've learned that when people tell a better story, they live a better life. And so they started writing it down. They said, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, people say we're all the hero in our own story. And I'm like, no, we're not. If I can make you the hero in your story, you'd see how amazing you
Yeah.
are.
That's so
We're
well
not
said.
the hero. And the other thing is we tell everybody else's story but our own. Oh, my husband did this, my father did that, my mother did this, they da 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 da. Where were you in the story? What did you do? And so I learned that when you tell stories more effectively, your life becomes better because you're seeing a story is an account of the past. Any account of the past is a story. An effective story is an account of the past that's relevant to the present, that gives hope to the future. Your stories, I've never heard you tell in any interview, in any book, in anything, tell a story that was ineffective. Because you can tell a story about this thing that happened that no one would rejoice in, that makes sense to me right now in the present. That means something. It's your story, but it's affecting me right now. It's giving me answers right now, and it's giving me hope for tomorrow. And so, in you telling stories that way, they're very holistic and they bring everybody in. And it doesn't matter what walk of life or what path we think we're on, we're all connected that way because we're already connected. So when we tell our stories better, not only do we get a better life, but everybody hearing it gets to go, oh, I know what to do now. Oh, I see. So your stories, even when you're sharing about the people who inspire you, who lift you, stories about your children, stories about your wife, your mother, your father, those stories feel like my stories, and they're not. But they make me see my stories, and that's what a good story should do.
Mm, so good. I love it. I'm going to skip past a few of the quotes that I wrote down because I think this one keeps us from doing what you challenge us to do right there, which is to
Mm,
tell a better story. So let's
yes.
talk about maybe one of the reasons why we don't. The chains on your wrist are not as strong as the ones on your mind.
Thank you for pulling that out. This is at the micro individual level or even small group family dynamics and at the societal level. We would rather find a reason why we don't do the thing that we know we're here to do. We'd rather have the chains be our reason. I can't do it because of these chains. Than to go inside. Going inside is scary, but it's only scary for a little while. When you have to look at your stories and your reason and the why and the how, and then you begin to see the light really quickly. You see that the chains on the wrist are easily broken, that freedom exists. I think of people like Sojourner Truth who looked up at the sky at night and had a better relationship with God than the one that the minister was telling her she could have. And said, that's not the God. That God you're telling me about is not the God. Everything I see is the God. We have so much within us.
Final quote, my friend, that I want to ask you about is we all have an opportunity of getting better. And sometimes that comes with a limp.
One night I drove home from a deacon's retreat. The deacons had prayed for me, and my body was in complete pain, total pain, pain that just searing deep, layer upon layer. It's in my blood. It was just everywhere. And I had been living that way because I would rather have physical pain than the doll that my brain can go into by taking the pain for the body. And because I've had a head injury, I know what it's like to not be able to read and to not be able to process and to not be able to think. And I didn't want that. So I lived with pain. And I got home after those deacons prayed for me, and I pulled into a little shop, the driveway, because I was in so much pain. And I just said, I just need this to go. And I felt a snap. And the other day, I was back at that same shop in that same parking space. And I said, hey, I no longer have that pain. I got out of the car, and I was still limping, but I didn't have that pain. I know that what is absolutely beautiful and perfect and divine for me is not the absolutely beautiful and perfect and divine for you, but it all is. I was dancing this morning and I was like, I wish I could dance the way I used to. And I could hear my mother say, girl, you used to done died. Dance like you dance now. Move like you move now. See like you see now. Be like you are now, because your being is the being that somebody needs. For every need, there is a purpose. For every purpose, there is a need. And like you have said, oh, and I attributed this quote to so many other people, and I was looking for it the other day, and I saw your name, and I was like, of course that was John. And it was, when you know your why, you can make it anyhow. It is that. I'm not here to be the best walker in the room. I'm here to be the best me.
I asked you before we started recording, what do you want our audience to get out of this? And what do you want to get out of this? And where they aligned, where they merged was you wanted them to be filled with renewal. You wanted them to be filled with hope. And you wanted them to recognize they were the reflection of God. For those listening to our conversation who are loving your life and loving the fact that you may walk with a limp, but you do it with a smile, they may love the fact that you rekindled that relationship with your mother and that you're impactful in audiences around the country and around the world. But they sit at home today with the blinds drawn and with the light dimmed.
Yeah.
What's your encouragement for those of us listening to this, just thinking, gosh, I'm glad they're happy. Good for them. I'm glad they're joyful.
Yeah.
Good for them. But it's not my story. How do you
No,
respond?
no, but you have stories and start telling them. Start by telling them to yourself. Don't try to do a whole lot, just a little bit. Just just a little bit, but do it often. Tell it to yourself. You don't even have to journal it. Just open your mouth and say, I'm here. I'm me. And just do it a little bit and do it a little every day and every day and every day. And the more you work that muscle, the more you see yourself, the more you will begin to feel more like the you that you want to be. It's not an easy journey. John, you have a gift that I don't have. I tell people I'm not a motivational speaker. If I was, then my children's bedrooms would have been much cleaner. My job is to inspire those who are up and moving, and they're just trying to figure out, how do I keep on moving? And that's different from getting up. But I found out in the pandemic that I was also gifted that way. That those who wanted to quit, who wanted to stop, who wanted to go, needed to know that they mattered and that somebody loved them. One of my friends said, "You are so weird that you have made I love you normal." If I can do anything, it is to say to you that I love you, that you are loved, that you matter, that you have something, the world, your world, the piece that you are, it is needed. Don't go anywhere yet. There's a spark of the divine in you that reflects back the light that I need. And I love you. You are loved. And whatever you've been through, whatever you've done, whatever you've seen, whatever you've endured, you are loved.
I mean, I just went to therapy. I'll make sure I put the check in the mail, but I appreciate my friends reminding me and us that we are loved. Dr. Berry, before I let you roll, we have 7 questions that tether all of our amazing guests together, and I'm going to roll you down the
I'll
path
go
right
quick.
now. You may walk with a limp, but take my hand. Let's go together. Question number 1, for a woman who has not only written extensively, I think you have 11 best-selling books out. You
14.
14 now.
We
You've
need to update things.
you've read everything twice. So this one's going to be difficult for you. But what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh, I'm reading one now. And I don't ever like to have the most of anything. You know, most people would say the Bible, and I'm like, which Bible did you read? I read it every year, and it's a different thing every year, and you see it a different way. Obviously, that is impactful. I'm a judge for a big literary prize. And if you could see my room right now, this table right now, it's spread with books that I have to rank. And every year I find the most impactful book. And then I get to go buy books based on those authors. So I'm never at a loss for the most delicious, nutritious, impactful. It is not fair to have anybody pick one, but I will say recently, because I just read it, reread it, and it was written in fourth, fifth century, City of God by Augustine. And then after that, probably anything by Percival Everett.
I love when Jesus was asked questions like which one, left or right. They wanted one answer, and he almost
Yeah,
always gave several. Like not with a period, but with a comma.
yeah.
What is the greatest commandment? Love God. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor.
Yes,
And I
yes.
love the fact that I'm asking you for one and you can't do it. And even
No.
when you gave me the second one, there was a comma behind that one too. So let's
Yeah.
move forward and talk about growing up in Delaware for a moment. What is one positive characteristic that you had as that little girl that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
I'm still curious, but not nearly as curious as I was as a kid.
So this curious woman who is radically curious must have been outstandingly so as a child. But if your home caught fire and
Yeah,
your children are out, your grandchildren are out, your family is out, the animals are out, everything that you love physically is out, but you have an opportunity of running in and grabbing one item, what would you race in and save?
nothing.
Let it burn?
Let it burn. It's stuff. Everybody's out. Everybody that I love, all the things. Are you kidding me? Nothing. Nothing. Amazing, wonderful art all throughout this place and amazing, wonderful things, but none of it will we take with us.
If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous Savannah day or St. Louis day when you come up and visit me and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be seated next to?
Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray, she was Forrest Gump. Her work was the work that Thurgood Marshall used for Brown versus the Board of Education. She was mentor to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was one of the first women to be ordained. She came in the second group. There's not a thing that is pivotal and impactful and important to our lives today that Pauli Murray didn't somehow have an impact on. She was the first Black person to sue to go to a white institution. She was the first person to sue a bus line. We don't think about her or remember her, but she did all those things like way before the sit-ins at the counters. She did that first. And I mean, like she rode the cargo trains across the country and she was there when the Scottsboro boys were arrested. And I mean, did like amazing, amazing life. I would love to talk to Pauli Murray.
What's the best advice Pauline or anyone else ever gave you? So the best advice you've ever received is,
Be yourself.
what advice would you go back in time and whisper to yourself at Jacksonville University at age 20?
Girl, you're going to have an amazing life.
Dr. Bertice Berry, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
I walked with purpose and I collided with destiny.
Dr. Bertice Berry, you did indeed walk with purpose. You have collided with destiny. You have reflected light, and we are grateful not only for your time, but for your love. We love you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Ah, thank you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And I so appreciate you being on the planet the same time I am.
My friends, that is the great Dr. Bertice Berry. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift it is. Live inspired. My friends, Dr. Bertice Berry shared countless thought-provoking one-liners with us during our recording, from no one has a monopoly on suffering and always clean the light to that thing that we thought was a burden is in reality a blessing. I also wrote down this one. When you tell a better story, you live a better life. Ugh, dude, that one's so important. When you tell a better story about your upbringing, about the challenges you face, about your singleness, about your marriage, about your struggles, about your blessings, when you choose to tell us a better story about your life, what happens then is you get to live a better life. It was such an honor to sit with Dr. Bertice Berry and to be able to share her heart and her light with each of you, my family and friends, today. If you enjoyed today's episode, you will also love the conversation I had a while back with Kelly Corrigan. Kelly is a celebrated storyteller and a New York Times bestselling author of Tell Me More and Glitter and Glue and The Middle Place and many more. As the host of PBS Tell Me More with Kelly Corrigan, Kelly shares insightful conversations with thought leaders, pulling out poignant lessons others can use to find their own calling or better understand their own walk in life. You can hear Kelly share her heartfelt wisdom and profound lessons on love, parenting, self discovery, and the importance of laughter and thoughtful reflection. Listen to the Kelly Corrigan on Live Inspired podcast, episode 602, or just by letting your fingers do the walking right now to johno'learyinspires.com/podcast. We'll have a link for you in today's show notes. My friends, family, leaders, servants, I want to thank you, as I always do, for tuning into this episode and encourage you to keep moving forward boldly into the headwinds we all face, because the foundation is firm. God is still God, and the best is yet to come. So for this time and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired.